So the year is 1984, and there's a new burger bar that's opened up in our area. It's called the Pink Panther, and its sign is actually the Pink Panther. And I can remember going to the Pink Panther with my uncle, who just told us about this new burger bar. And so just him and I went down there, and the smell, that just an amazing smell, was making me hungry. It was like this freshly grilled beef patty. You could just smell that was searing like a barbecue, pretty much, wafting down the main street of the little town that we were living in. And yeah, the smell was amazing. And I just remember, wasn't excited. I didn't know what to expect. So, and what was I was 8. So I wasn't super excited. I didn't know what I was, in for. I just thought, oh, food. I think I even asked it, do they have like fish and chips there? And my uncle said, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure they will. As we got closer, then I smelt that. And I thought, oh man, now I'm hungry. So this massive, well, when I say massive, probably isn't in the scheme of things now, but to a kid, this big sign out the front on the awning of the Pink Panther, basically standing there. And then we got there. Now, it was only a small place, right? Big enough serving front where it could probably have comfortably maybe 10 people there waiting, but it then just spilled out into the main sort of footpath, and there was heaps of space. A couple of tables and chairs there where you could eat outside. Nothing inside other than 2 video arcade cabinets side by side. For those of you who ever have any interest in arcade machines or can remember some from back in those days, there was elevator action, which was basically you're a undercover agent or a spy or whatever, and basically come down and you're going down the center of a building on elevators. Hence it's called elevator action. The idea is to get from the top to the bottom, collecting all the red doors as you go down, and then you escape in your car. You go to the next building, which is then a different color, and your enemies, which are these just basically black silhouetted spies or enemies, whatever they are, trying to shoot you. And anyway, that's that game. And the other one was, I want to say it's called Rally, and you're just a car. Wasn't a car game with a steering wheel. Don't know if many were existed around that time frame. So it still had a joystick and a button, and you had to get around a map and collect flags, and then you had enemy cars that were trying to catch you and basically crash into you, and your button would allow you to do a smoke screen, but you had limited smoke screen for the level until you collected all of the flags and then go to the next level and that sort of thing. I only really played the elevator action once, a few times that I went there, and I could play on that. But yeah, just fond memories, the smell, arcade games, the people. There always seemed to be people there that my uncle knew. I don't know if he always knew them, but it's like he'd be talking to them like he knew them. So it's like there's a social element of going there. Intellectual property clearly wasn't an issue back then. Pink Panther, you can't tell me this little burger bar had asked for any rights from, I don't know, is it Warner Brother or Hanna-Barbera, whoever owns Pink Panther. And that's just amazing. Oh, and the milkshakes. I remember the milkshakes they did. Also, where they had branded cups, even, Pink Panther, on the cups. So back in those days, they obviously got away with that somehow. And no, I'm wrong. They had a default line of cups. I remember. I think they were called like a tall boy or something, and they had a giraffe on them. Sorry, not the Pink Panther, it was a giraffe. And they were common cups you'd get from various places that you could get milkshakes. Didn't have the Pink Panther on them. But yeah, I remember actually, and it was there that my uncle put me on to a spearmint flavoured milkshake. So I'd typically always gone like the usual vanilla, strawberry or a chocolate as a kid. Never really tried any of these random one-off flavours. But anyway, he put me onto spearmint. Let me have a taste first of his one before he ordered me one. He says, I'm going to let you taste the spearmint milkshake. It's one of my favourites. You might like it, you might not. And I had a taste, sure enough. Yes, I'll have one of those things. And spearmint's been, if I can find it, it's not easy to find these days, but if I can find that flavour in a milkshake, I'm going to have that. Next closest for me is a lime flavour. So yeah, just the memories, right? So I know that was a long sort of intro, going back in time, bit of a story, but I just want to, basically I just want to go back and look at things that have changed, things we've lost, and things from those periods that I believe are important to hold on to. So I don't know, this is the second one of these I've sort of done. I don't know whether I'm going to end up creating some sort of flashback series, for want of a better word, but I don't dwell in nostalgia. I'm not a collector. I don't have a whole lot of anything from those times. In fact, I've got nothing from that era physically. I just like reliving memories, and taking the best parts of them, relaying them in stories to my family, and hopefully eventually my grandchildren too, if they want to sit there and listen to me babble. Although this shouldn't be babbling. So that's what I'm going to do. I like to look at what we've lost and or what has changed, and what we can implement in today's day and age that we take from that period that is, in my opinion, for me personally, I deem it important. So that story I was just telling you about leads me to what we used to have in the 80s and before. And even in the 90s, there were a lot of independent outlets, depending on the size of town and or city you lived in or grew up in. In those days, I guess nowadays you're moving towards like suburbs that are close together, being really self-sufficient. In those days, it was mainly more sort of like towns, maybe shires or whatever you want to call them, like a suburb collective, kind of like today, but they were smaller, were sort of self-sufficient, but they were self-sufficient with non-chains, like chain outlets or chain stores. So, like in the 80s, like anything from like video stores were independently owned. None of your Blockbusters or anything had come in yet, in my area anyway. Fast food, we had one KFC. That was it. There was no other fast food chain in my area. Everyone else was an independent. Sorry, there was a Pizza Hut as well, like your classic dine-in restaurant type. But there was still room for like your independent pizza stores, plenty of them. And burger bars and fish and chip stores were big in my area where I grew up. In New Zealand, actually, is where I grew up. Moved to Australia in 2001, and I've lived there ever since. I've got family based here and family based back in New Zealand. My father's side here, my mother's side over there. And I'd always wanted to come and make a go of it here, and of course I started to give that a go, and I've never gone back. So Australia and Queensland in particular is home. Home away from home. So Dad's from here. Right. We've lost that independence of small stores. And it wasn't just like eateries, there was also, like even, I wouldn't say department stores, but your other stores, clothing stores, furniture stores. I can't even remember the names of those as a kid, because it just didn't interest me clearly. But like areas to eat, anywhere that included video games. We had what was called the soda pop shop, and at the front, right, and this was an ice cream store, right, and nowadays the closest thing you get would be like a Cold Rock or a Baskin Robbins. But basically you could create your own form of ice creams and even cones. They had a wide range of stuff. And that was the frontage of the store. And in fact, they did like a range of like American hot dogs and other things as well, but predominantly it was like specialty ice creams and desserts. And that was awesome. I just remember it being like, it was very Americanized. So it had like, it was your red, whites, mostly white, but then like your red seating, blue trim around the little square tables that you could sit on, because there wasn't a lot of room there. But then there was a side door, and you wouldn't know from the front main street that behind there was an arcade, like a video game parlor. So arcade place behind that. And so this would be like my go-to for most of my childhood, this place. Just absolutely fabulous. And at around that time frame, I remember in the 80s, so you'd walk in there and it would be just full of 80s music. And I don't know why, I assume because most of the music I must have heard in those days was Queen. But, any Queen song just makes me feel like I'm in an arcade when I hear it today. So I could picture myself walking into a video, into this particular arcade, which was the soda pop shop, ironically, and then It's a Kind of Magic or something like that would be blasting, or The Invisible Man or something like that, one of the Queen classics. And then you'd have, against one wall was half pinball machines and half like video game machines. All down one other side of the building against the wall was arcade machines. Uprights, there were no cocktail machines in that particular arcade. They all stand up, so cocktail ones are the ones you sit down, usually Pac-Man or whatever. You'd have like two players sitting opposite each other. Middle was a pool table, actually two pool tables, and jukebox down the other side. And then what back directly onto the soda pop shop was a little like, coin and exchange booth, so you can get your coins to put into your machines. And it was just like amazing. So you'd lead up and you'd smell like these waffle cones, right? That's what I always got from the soda pop shop out the front. So I get a waffle cone with like a soft, creamy, soft serve with like strawberry and chocolate topping. That was my go-to, and what we call a flake chocolate, so like a crumbly sort of dairy milk chocolate embedded in that as well. But those waffle cones that's such a rich, sweet smell and a unique smell, and you'd smell them before you're even getting anywhere near there. You still had that smell when you got into the arcade, which I would later come to realize was an awesome thing, because I went into some arcades that were just standalone arcade parlors without any attachment to any other store, and they were usually dark, sort of dank, bit sweaty, bit smelly, but this place, no, it just absolutely brilliant, full of lights, sounds, amazing colors. And that in itself, so like the arcades are something that have really gone. You got the equivalent, which is called like a time zone now, but the machines and what you have there are, it's almost, like you're playing to win tickets, not to get a high score to beat a friend and challenge them. And so, I don't know, some of it feels like a bit of gambling, which I don't like, like you're spinning wheels to try and win as many tickets as you can. And it's like, well, what's the fun in that, really? It's a form of gambling machine to me. There's no skill or anything involved in playing something or strategy. But that's something we've lost. We've lost a physical place to go to play those sorts of machines. We've lost those unique outlets that are standalone. A mum and dad or whoever it is has dreamt up that idea that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start this place and I'm going to call it the Pink Panther or the Soda Pop Shop, and I'm going to chuck on an arcade in the back of it without a separate name. It's all one business. And man, did it work, and it worked so well. And so that's what we've lost. And things have changed, and they're changing even more. So you still have some independence, Like, we've got a local Italian pizza place that we still support, but I know they struggle. And, you know, well, we love them. We don't just support them purely because they're a solo store. Like, they do really good pizza, healthy topping, like a lot of just like, you know, like I get the meat lovers, but it's quality steak type of meat that they put on there, you know, so it's not just like processed meats and stuff. So they're becoming fewer and fewer, depending on where you live. Certain parts of the world may have still a lot more independent stores than not, but chains have taken over, and they'll continue to take over. They push the little people out, and clearly things like, you know, companies, especially big companies, protecting the IP is a huge deal now. You know, you don't get, little businesses don't think of calling their store something like that because they just won't get away with it in today's day and age, no matter where you are. So, yeah, that's a shame. We've lost, and things have changed and are changing. Now, the next one, because I always sort of bring two to the party, two topics. So that one's, you know, outlets, stores. And the next one's like, I'll put these for two together. First phones and computers, right? Because I touched on arcade games, and so computers comes into that. Now, I can remember the first phone that I got that was a mobile phone. Well, just look at phones in general. So we went from a dial phone. We would have had a dial phone up until the 90s. Pretty sure we still had that. I remember the tone and the dial changed, but it was still the same. We got extra numbers tacked on as the area expanded and grew. But I think it would have been like sort of like early to mid 90s when then I know the connection changed as well. All houses had a new connection point in their house, and we went to like push button. And then also around the same time would have like push button, but more not really relocatable. Like, you could stretch them to get from room to room sort of thing if you wanted to. We didn't in my home, but I know friends that did do that. And then from that you went to wireless, but still like a landline phone. Around the same time, you know, with push buttons, same time the very first sort of mobile phones came out, the bricks, which was my first mobile phone. I remember this black Nokia with a leather case and a permanently out aerial on it. It would have stood about that high easily and about that fat, as heavy as anything. Just had the most basic of sort of screens on there that would, like a calculator screen to bring up the number that was coming in or you're dialing out. That would have been 2001. It was when we first moved here to Australia. My first job as a company phone I was given for my role. And saying that, it would have come out a lot sooner than that, probably late 80s, but they were holding on to the battery life, and it was shocking. But then soon after I'd been there for a few months, they upgraded to a new, what was then new at the time, this Nokia, this classic, I don't know what they call, like a 6010. The first phones to have like Snake on it with a square LED in the middle. Probably still about that high, sort of came out with a little curve, push button. I think it was also, it was the first one that you could SMS on by doing your multiple clicks on numbers. So I remember those. I remember the reception being absolutely terrible. You know, if you were sort of anywhere out sort of the CBD or too close to like, and even in this area with trees, it wouldn't have worked or very well at all. Patchy reception. Was still a huge need for landline phones, although landline phones by that stage were also wireless within your house, so you'd have a base station and then you could pretty much leave that on a charging dock separate to the main station. Usually have a couple around the house. I remember we had a couple of those. So yeah, so that's the whole phone thing then. And computers, personal computers. Now, I never owned a personal computer until I was an adult. But I'd see them around, and in schools, the first computers I remember, like your early Macintoshes, with your grey screen, so like black and white, and your first apples, they were green and black screen, and then still in the 80s, but getting towards mid to late 80s, were the first sort of colour computers. I remember that like friends of mine had like Amstrads, and the games on those were starting to get pretty good, but in saying that, the arcade games were also still above that, so they were scaling. So the games that you were getting in the late 80s on a PC were ports of video games on arcade probably from the early 80s, so they hadn't quite got to that level of quality there yet. For me personally, my first computer that I got, I think it was like a Pentium 1, 4 gigabytes of memory. It had a floppy drive, the old floppy drive, and a disk drive. But in saying that, the disk drive, so the ROM drive, so not to be confused with a DVD drive, this was a CD-ROM drive, right? So your softwares like your Windows or your Office and stuff like that back in those days were on a disc, but not a DVD quality disc. And then your floppy drives, I think they were like 4 megabytes of memory. That's what they could hold from memory. And I remember too, like sectors it'd be quite common for those discs, if they were heavily used, to become like damaged or get a bit of grit on them or something, and then sectors on them wouldn't work. I don't know how many times I still would get as much memory, working memory, out of those discs as I could. And dangerous too, because like you're using it to store something and then it would completely crap itself and then you lose what you had. But you know, scarcity is what made things so great back in the day, you know, because I didn't have a computer. I'd still be going to a friend's place to see and or play on their computer. They weren't at such a grade, or nor could they afford all of the games that would go on it, and it was still affordable and cost effective to give your children pocket money for their chores, and then pocket money would go to an arcade to spend, and on ice creams, of course, and milkshakes. But yeah, I can remember those first machines just having such little memory. You couldn't really do anything with them. They're still relying solely on your external discs, and yeah, but very good memories. And I remember I was so lucky because I was raised relatively poor, so I didn't have my own computer. I had a Nintendo Entertainment System, the closest I ever got as a kid, which I was still super excited about. I got that when I was, well, how old was I? 12, 13? 12. And, you know, and that was still super cool. But fortunately enough for me, between all of my friends around the neighborhood and even out a bit further, that we had everything. So like my Nintendo would go in a bag to go to a friend's place who had a Sega, right? His Sega might come to my house at some point, or it goes in his bag and we go off to Tony's place and he's got an Amstrad, or someone else has got like a Lynx, or someone else, Scotty's got like a collection of those old Time and Watch games, and he had like heaps of them. And so, you know, between us all, we had such an amazing collection, and that's the scarcity part. Like, no one had everything, no one had access to everything, no one could afford everything. And I don't know whether we all planned it that way to have a bit of something different, and whether the, you know, parents and grandparents were in discussions about, oh, you know, Jeremy's got that, Matthew's got this, the twins have got these, and yeah, it's pretty cool. So I just wanted to break it down, have a bit of a reminiscence. What do I want to take away from those times for me personally? So I will support quality small outlets for as long as I possibly can. So it's for as long as they exist, basically. And I'm pretty big on that. I like to think, I know my wife's big on that, and we've instilled that in our kids. Whether they really realise it or not, they just tend to still be eating, you know, ordering and visiting the same outlets we have, but they're few and far between now. But still big on that. Phones. So even though we've seen this upgrade in technology, making it so easy to keep in touch, it's like as my kids were growing up, I would still try and instill in them physically getting to each other's place, because that was something that I was seeing in their generation, is that they're keeping in touch online and playing games online, but not physically seeing each other or going and hanging out half as much as what we used to do, which is almost every afternoon after school. So it's another thing I've definitely tried to instill in them, is don't let technology and its ease of access become your only form of access, all right? Because there's a fatigue there as well. It just becomes, it's dopamine overload, basically, is what it is. So you're scrolling, you're flashing, you're messaging, and you're not even laughing at half the memes and that you're seeing come up on your screen. So even that quick access and accessibility in your hands and the power in your hands, you're losing something very important. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Beautiful day it's turned out to be. I'm going to get home, spend some time with the little ones. The ducks are out and about. So, yeah. Thanks for joining me. And until next time, look after yourself. I'll show you these ducks.